His life was painfully ordinary. His days lined up like identical tiles. Same alarm, same commute, same coffee, same conversations that never went deeper than weather and deadlines. He wasn't miserable, but he wasn't ecstatic either. He was somewhere in the middle, in that Vietnam territory where nothing is bad enough to break, and nothing is good enough to remember. People called it stability. To him, it felt more like sleepwalking. On an overcast afternoon, he ducked into a small second-hand bookstore to escape a light drizzle. The place was narrow, quiet, and smelled of old paper and wood. A bell above the door chimed softly. Inside, time seemed to move slower. He walked between the shelves, not really seeing the titles. It was less about reading and more about hiding. A few minutes of silence before sliding back into his predictable life. He was turning to leave when it happened. Someone brushed past him in the cramped aisle. He caught only a glimpse. A dark coat, the edge of a collar, a hand holding a worn book. No face, no eye contact, just an ordinary, anonymous collision. And then the air around him changed. A scent slipped into his awareness like a slow inhale. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was deep, warm, and strangely calm, like a quiet room lit by a single lamp. There was nothing familiar about it, yet it felt like something he had been missing without knowing. For a moment, the bookstore faded. All that remained sharp was that scent. Then it was gone. The stranger moved on. The bell chimed. The door opened and closed. The smell of dust and paper returned. He stood there a few seconds longer, as if waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. He could have forgotten it there, but he didn't. Over the next few days, the memory of that scent drifted in and out of his mind at odd moments, while he washed dishes, while he stared at a spreadsheet. It was the echo of a question he hadn't heard fully yet. Weeks passed. Routine closed over him again, like water, until the scent returned. The second time, he was underground. The subway car was full, the air thick with the smells of metal, fabric, and the tiredness of people heading home. He stood near the door, headphones in, but not really listening. At the next station, a wave of people pushed in. Noise and motion. Then, suddenly, a pocket of stillness. The scent slid into that space like it had been waiting. Same warmth. Same depth. His breath caught. His eyes lifted, scanning the car. On the opposite side, partly blocked by other passengers, he saw a figure in a dark coat, holding a book. The person's head was turned away. The train lurched. Lights flickered. More people stepped between them. At the next stop, the doors opened, and the scent dissolved. He told himself it was a coincidence, a trick of the mind. The explanation was reasonable. It just didn't feel true. Because something inside him had shifted. He started to notice how little of his life he was actually choosing. The way he said yes out of habit. The way he avoided anything that might interrupt the quiet flatness he'd mistaken for peace. The third time the scent appeared, the world was washed in rain. He slipped into a narrow cafe, the windows fogged from the warmth inside. He ordered a coffee and sat by the window. The bell above the door chimed. He didn't look up right away. Only when the air around him shifted did his attention snap into focus. The scent wrapped around him with the slow certainty of a hand resting on a shoulder. He lifted his head. At the counter stood a person removing a wet coat. He saw the outline of a profile, the tilt of a jaw, but the air around them was different. He considered walking over, saying something. But what? I've been breathing the ghost of your existence across the city. The thought was embarrassing. So he stayed seated. He watched silently as the stranger took their coffee and walked out into the rain-to-door suit. The scent lingered, then faded. This time, he couldn't just go back to normal. Sitting there, he realized the perfume had become more than a smell. It was a pattern, a marker. It appeared when he stepped even slightly off the rails of his predictable route, the bookstore, the later train, the random cafe. It was as if the world were quietly underlining certain moments, nudging him. Here, pay attention. He began to. He started to see the spaces where small choices lived. The second before he said sure when he wanted to say no. The fork between taking the shortest way home or turning left for no reason at all. The scent didn't show up every time, but it appeared often enough, around just enough pivotal moments, that he stopped dismissing it as chance. When a coworker asked him to help on a project outside his usual role, his instinct was to say no. The word hovered, ready to fall out. He hesitated. The silence before his answer felt familiar, like the stillness that always came right before the scent. He didn't smell it then, but the feeling was the same. An invitation. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." The project was messy, uncomfortable, and demanding. It forced him to speak up, to admit when he didn't know something, to learn. One evening, after a long day on that project, he stepped into the elevator, and a familiar warmth brushed past him. The scent was there, the faintest trace, like a signature on an invisible contract. The message felt clear. "You're not on autopilot right now. Keep going." Over time, the changes in his life accumulated. He ended a relationship that had been safe, but slowly suffocating. It hurt, but it made room for a silence that didn't feel like avoidance anymore. He moved apartments, not to somewhere more impressive, but somewhere more honest. A smaller place, more light, fewer things. He started giving real, protected time to something that had always sat at the back of his mind. Writing, drawing. It didn't matter what. What mattered was that for an hour or two each day, it was not a function or a role. He was just himself. Every so often, in the middle of these new routines, the scent would reappear. In a hallway he'd never noticed, in the seats of a small venue where he'd gone alone, on a bridge at night when he took the long way home. He never found the perfume. At some point, he stopped trying. He realized it didn't matter what brand it was or who had bought it. It wasn't a product. It was a symbol. A marker that appeared at the edges of his comfort zone every time he leaned into a version of himself that was more awake, more honest. Years passed, his life didn't become a fairy tale. He wasn't suddenly famous or a millionaire. But the texture of his days was different. He worked in a role that used the parts of him he once thought were irrelevant. His relationships were fewer, but deeper. Silence no longer felt like something to escape sometimes. It felt like home. One evening, he thought back to the man he used to be, the one moving like a ghost inside his own story. He tried to pinpoint when it had all changed. There was no single night. There was a bookstore, a subway car, a rainy cafe, dozens of small forks in the road where he could have chosen the old way and instead took one small step into the unknown. Each of those moments was scented in his memory with the same quiet fragrance. His story hadn't been flipped. It had been edited slowly, line by line, the way a scent slowly fills a room. You barely notice when it starts, and then you realize every breath you take is different. It wasn't one big moment. It was a series of tiny ones that all smelled the same. A single scent that showed up whenever he was about to either stay the same or become someone new. He didn't change quickly. He changed slowly. But he changed completely. Thanks for watching.